Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast, episode 16. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of our Cybersafe Digest. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of Neuways, and here we also have
Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at Neuways.
And normally, Toby, we are sitting in the same room in our offices in Derby, but we thought we had a bit of variety this week. I'm sitting in my office at home in Nottingham, where it's currently 3.2 degrees outside, and a little bit overcast. Are you in Derby, Toby? Or
I am not in Derby. I'm a little further afield. I'm actually in Orlando at the moment. I'm attending a cybersecurity conference, Zero Trust World, this week. So yeah, we've got forecast highs of 26 degrees today. So yeah, slightly warmer than the East Midlands.
Okay, so you get to go to Florida, and that's absolutely lovely. And I get to put the bins out in a little while, which is lovely, super. So, tell us about the conference. What's happening now?
So, Zero Trust World, it's an event hosted by a security vendor, and really the principle behind the conference and their product suite is this notion of zero trust. So, it expands really upon some of the things we spoke about in the last couple of podcasts, where we spoke about principles of least privilege and people only having need-to-know access to things. Zero trust is kind of a Gartner coined term for all of these things. So that's kind of the phrase of the day. It's what all the cool kids are saying. But zero trust really is the core principle of the things we've been speaking about. Give people only the access they need. It goes a little bit deeper than that. It's a bit more widespread. One of the principles is never trust and always verify. So don't assume that something is safe just because it's coming from a known location. So this breaks kind of one of the walls really that everyone has thought about for so long, that, well, it's inside my network, it's behind the firewall, it's safe, therefore I can trust it. And zero trust really is saying you can't do that. You have to, location and context are completely irrelevant. You should validate access and permissions every single time you try to do something.
So we said it's a cultural thing, and the reality is, it's actually a bit of to some people, it might be a bit of a shock to suddenly be in what we call a zero trust mindset. So if you've been in an organization which has been growing, a business has been growing, and we've always talked about this podcast being aimed at the people responsible for IT, but not executing IT, the CEOs, CFOs, and such like. This concept of zero trust culturally can be quite difficult for some organizations, because you've grown this business together. We use our systems in a particular way, but suddenly we're going to shut everything down, and we're not going to trust anybody, or we're not going to trust anything, or to get everything to look at it and say, oh, do we trust that? And let's prove that we can trust it before assuming we can. It's quite a shift in mindset for people, but it's also, but it's actually probably a natural extension of what your attitude should be to all things. I mean, I'm terrible with all emails I receive, in that unless I know the person, I've had emails from them before, and so it's like I generally ignore them, because I'm afraid that might be phishing attempts and such like. Yeah, that zero trust to me is in my blood, which I hopefully people don't take offence at. It's just that, hey, don't trust anything until you've verified it. I guess it's the same for this concept that is being delivered here, and you're finding out more in this conference.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a really, really important thing, because it is a concept and it is a mindset. It's not, you can't just buy a zero trust thing and suddenly you're all good. And there's a lot of, because it's one of the latest buzzwords. There's a lot of products that use zero trust in their marketing spiel, and we just need to try and be careful that doesn't infer something that it's not. That it's not over exaggerating its place in this world. There's a lot of things you can do from a zero trust perspective, as we spoke about on the podcast last week, that are actually either zero cost or very low cost, and actually they help massively in improving that security posture. I mean, I think the other thing with zero trust is when you kind of break it down into lay speak, a lot of it sounds really, really obvious. So an example might be, I've got an Office 365 environment and I only want computers that are owned by the organization to connect to it. Now that sounds like something that you absolutely want. And that would be a tenet of zero trust, because you're saying, I'm not going to allow anything that's on the internet to connect to my 365 environment, only the things that are owned and managed by my organization. Yet that's something that isn't done by default. That's something that is requires a certain level of licensing to get to. So you typically need the business premium suite to be able to do that. And but it's something that is relatively attainable. And in plain English, it sounds like a really, really obvious thing. I only want to have my computers connect to my environment. It sounds like a really obvious thing to do, and zero trust is kind of helping to enable that. So this mindset, this product, this combination of those things. Another example might be, I only want my company computers to access my company network, whether that be through VPN or physical access or wide connection within the office or on Wi-Fi. And again, it sounds, as a business owner, well, that's exactly what I want. But actually, that's not how most places are set up, because it's actually kind of difficult to set those things up sometimes, and it can be kind of expensive to do it. So that's kind of where this whole zero trust mentality is starting to snowball, really, to help make these things accessible and deliverable. Because of course the other thing you need to be able to do is prove that that's what's happening, and that's a really important piece. You need to prove that only my computers can do these things. So really, really interesting. I think one of the other components that they've been talking about in the conference is only allowing applications that you trust in the organization. So it's kind of sitting alongside your traditional antivirus or EDR solution and looking at all of the things that you're running and building a profile of what normal looks like, and saying, okay, well, the normal stuff is allowed to run and the other stuff can't. Now they can then provide a mechanism for saying, okay, well, this is something that's not on our normal allow list. So it's referred to as application allow listing. And it's basically a list of all of the programs that we're allowed to run. So your Words and your Outlooks and those kinds of things, they all get added to this application allow list. And they run because they're allowed to run. But other programs, so something that perhaps somebody shouldn't be using, so something you're not licensed for, or something that perhaps is malicious, if they're not on that allow list, they're not going to be allowed to run. But then they solve for this with, and again, something we touched on slightly last week, is they provide the ability to request access to it. So you can't run this because policy prohibits it, but do you want to run it? And you can then say yes or no and be prompted for writing a business justification. I need to do this because I need to. A great example that I keep hearing about is updating QuickBooks. You need to have certain rights to update QuickBooks. So you can try and run it. It says, well, you're not allowed to run this, but do you want to? And you say, yes, I want to. I'm trying to update QuickBooks. And that will then go off to the administrator of this system, and they would then see that. So, and then they can then make a judgment from a security perspective. So, the business justifications come in. I need to update QuickBooks. And then the security team or the IT team will see and say, oh, okay, yeah, it's QuickBooks. Yeah, that matches. Okay, we'll allow that. So it's just giving you that granular control over what is actually running inside your network. And I think one of the things that it can really do is surface all of these things that you shouldn't be running. Software that you don't have licenses for, or software that is no longer supported. So both of which it can also help protect against, be that extra set of belt and braces over and above everything else that you do already to try and stop malicious code running inside the organization, because if its name's not down, it's not coming in. So it's quite a powerful concept, and that's some of the stuff that we're talking around this week.
I guess the truth is that, of course, the journey is back to front in a way. So by that I mean, you start off a business and you try to make things as useful as possible, and software and computers, and set up your environment in that way. And it tends to be open because that's the way it is. It's about the level of expertise. And because if you were sitting down with a blank sheet of paper, you build it this way up. Yeah,
Exactly, and if you knew about it, so some of this, as you say, is about understanding, what you need to do, and yeah.
And whereas these days, you've been running your business for 10 years, 15, 20 years, you've got this environment, and frankly, what you've had is over that period of time something I call creeping compromise, whereby you say, hey, look, we need to use this for doing this little job here. Somebody's been in, joined the business, they've done something special with this bit of graphic software, but then they've left and it's still sitting around, or other people have picked it up. And you might start out with this idea that you're going to do things absolutely properly. You probably don't, but you try to do things as effectively and efficiently as possible, but not with security in mind. And let's face it, 5-10 years ago, it wasn't at the forefront of everybody's mind. It was about getting things done. So the journey to this mindset is actually quite a difficult one, because you're not starting from scratch. You're actually trying to reel a lot of stuff back in, and it's difficult for organizations. And that's probably why you need some help, I would have thought.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you think of the scale, of convenience versus security, in many cases, it tips definitely onto that side of convenience, and there's a huge momentum shift to get people actually back into a positive, to bring that scale back down so that there's more of an equal balance. Because, as you say, particularly when organisations are starting out and they're not, IT people, they're not security people, it's what can we do? How can we do it? And it's all about enablement. And what we then need to get back to is how can we put some guardrails around that enablement? We don't want to stop anyone innovating and being reactive to the market pressures they see, but there also needs to be a recognition that some of these things can be dangerous. It happens I've seen it happen in organisations I've been in before. Somebody said, I need to do some graphics software editing. Can I have a license for Photoshop or whatever the tool at the time is? Oh, yeah, that's £400-500. No, you can't. You only need it for an hour. So go off and find something. They go off and find something on the internet, and it might be something that costs them $20, and they use it once and it just sits there forever and it never gets updated. Or it might be some free software, or I've even seen it where organisations go and get hooky versions of these tools, and they get a key generator to generate the license key. These are all bad things to have, partly because they might be breaching license rules. You're taking some basically, you're using software illegally, but it's also the risk that comes with those. These are like, imagine that there's an attacker out there and they want to try and capture people to run their malware. What do they dangle in front of them? Free software, free Microsoft Office, free Adobe, this, that, and the other, free, and come and download it. And of course, you download it and you might get a functioning product, but what's the baggage that it's brought with it? Is there something now on your machine, running on your machine, which invariably will have needed administrator rights to install, so it now potentially has full access to your machine and or full access to your network? So these are the things that we're trying to solve for when we start talking about principles of least privilege and zero trust and things like that. We're talking about helping to protect yourself from the bad guys that are starting to get really, really clever and really, really ingenious, and really understanding what makes businesses tick. How do they operate? How do they work? What are their pressures? What do they need? And you're trying to address those pain points in here's some cheap software, here's some free software. That can be quite enticing to certain people, particularly if they don't not necessarily do anything bad. They think they're actually helping the business. Well, we don't need to buy it. I'll only need it for a bit. I'll grab it, and of course it never gets uninstalled because, well, I might need it next week. So it sits there, and even if you do uninstall it, what does it leave behind? And that's the great unknown, and that's kind of one of the risks that shadow IT brings. And again, that's one of the components around zero trust, is helping to eradicate that shadow IT, the IT that is kind of flying under the radar from what it's one of these, from the Donald Rumsfeld quote, we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And shadow IT definitely fits into that. We don't know what we don't know. And organizations can go through quite a painstaking process of trying to surface all of this stuff, whereas actually some of the tenets of zero trust expose that through their very nature of operating, because you're creating the rules of what's good, and anything else, well, we don't care because it can't run. It's just been knocked on the head. So it's a really powerful concept, and it's I think the challenge is how do you transition from what people are doing today to this new state of mind?
I think to conclude, zero trust network, zero trust mindset, my apologies, a zero trust mindset makes absolute sense for an organization. Okay, well, Toby, thank you very much for that. It's been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to when you get back learning a whole load more, and we'll talk about these things in much more detail, I'm sure. I hope you have a good journey back. Enjoy the weather in the meantime. That warmth sounds like a wonderful thing. I'm just going to go out in the garden now and try and appreciate what it must be like over there. So have a good conference. We'll see you next week, and everyone else will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 16 of our Cybersafe Digest weekly podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.